Being an online business owner is full of ups and downs. Some days you can't imagine going back to your 9 to 5, and other days you want to burn your whole business to the ground. We get it.
Welcome to Chaos to Conversions, a podcast of practical, no BS strategies to grow your online business. Each week, we're chatting about launching, copywriting, mindset, and more, so you can make sense of the chaos and do more of what works.
Join the conversation and let's grow together.
So many entrepreneurs walk away from a solid launch feeling disappointed, not because it flopped, but because their expectations were out of sync with reality. What's normal? Did your launch really suck as much as you think it did? Let's jump in. Hello, and welcome back to Chaos to Conversions. This is Melanie here with a solo episode talking all about the debrief question that can change everything in your launch. And it's probably not what you think. The question I want you to ask yourself is, were your expectations for your launch realistic? Or did you make up your goals and wishes for your launch based on comparison and sort of willy-nilly dreams? And I say that not to make you feel bad. It's just spending the last summer and the 3 summers before that, managing launches for digital courses, memberships, and online programs. I have seen the gamut in the over 100 launches at this point that I've managed and participated in. I've seen the gamut of expectations and people managing expectations. And the expectations shape directly how we feel about our launch results. And if you are basing your expectations on hype or comparison or wishful thinking or comparing to somebody else in your niche, disappointment will be inevitable. So when we ground our launch expectations in things like data and capacity and comparing yourself to yourself and not yourself to other people, this is when you can hopefully start to feel a little bit better about your launch. And so when we think about this, here are some examples of what unrealistic expectations might look like. So a few examples might include experiencing something or expecting something like a 10% conversion if you've only ever launched your program once before. And this is kind of a double-edged sword. And here's why. Because sometimes if you have a really engaged audience, or if you have a really warm audience, if it is your first launch, you might snap up all those people who have been waiting for you to release an offer just like the one you're releasing. So again, I'm speaking kind of in generalized terms because it can go different ways for different people. But if your audience is really engaged, it's a brand new offer, you've never launched before, yes, sometimes those can be over a 10% conversion. Now, I say that with a big old asterisk of that you planned it, that you had all of your ducks in a row, and that you, air quote, knew what you were doing in the way that you were delivering a training that was meaningful, that you were sending follow-up emails after, all of the sort of components that come with a live launch. Then you might have a great launch right out the gate. Now, if you are having a reflection about your launch and you are thinking, oh, yeah, I sent one follow-up email, or I did one webinar and it didn't go the way I wanted, so then I phoned it in and didn't do any of the other ones that I had originally planned. That might be an example of maybe you were hoping for a 10% conversion right out the gate, but if you've never launched before, it might not go as well as you have wanted it to. The other side of that double-edged sword is where sometimes first launches go extremely, extremely well if it's like a brand new offer or a brand new, course or membership, is expecting your conversion rates to consistently stay the same if you have launched the same course, membership, or offer multiple times before in the exact same way without making a super concerted effort to differentiate this launch from previous launches or making a super concerted effort to grow your list, right? Your audience might be getting a little bit burnt out, and maybe your first launch, right? You plucked all of those, people who were super excited for what you were offering, and you kind of like scooped up the low-hanging fruit, but now we've launched the same offer for the fourth, fifth time. That's not to say that it can't still be successful, but you might have to work a little bit harder and you might have to think a little bit outside of the box. So have an honest conversation with yourself about if is this your first launch? Is it a multiple launch? Are you expecting your results to stay the same? Because the other thing to sort of keep in mind is messaging. Even if you have your messaging on point and you feel really good about your messaging at the beginning of your business and the beginning of your offer, messaging is a journey and it is going to evolve and change with your audience, with the economy, with what's going on in the world. At the time recording this in mid 2025, the world is a little bit on fire, literally and metaphorically. So that does affect the online space. Of course, the numbers and launching feels much different in 2025 than it did in 2021. So it's another thing to consider. Are you just simply expecting 2021 results from the exact same effort that you are putting in 2025? Other examples of what might be considered sort of unrealistic expectations are if you are underestimating the amount of prep work required to pull off a complex launch like a challenge or a multiple day webinar with multiple times, and then you get really behind, feel overwhelmed and flustered, and you end up sort of phoning in the whole thing, expecting 50% of your audience to buy, or looking at your email list of like 30,000 people and not taking into account your open rate, for example. So if you haven't cleaned your list for a while, if you have an email list of 30,000 people, like I mentioned, but your open rates are consistently only 20%, you should not be expecting, 15,000 of your 30,000 email list to buy. The last thing that can kind of set you up, or could, I'm not saying it does, but could set you up for unrealistic launch expectations is if your life situation has changed a little bit. Perhaps last time you were launching, last year you didn't have any kids and now you have a new baby at home, for example. So you're unable, which is okay, but you're unable to show up, or you're too tired, your energy is different, showing up as many times on things like stories or showing up for a live event. And I'm just picking on kids because having two kids, I know that they can make it a little bit more difficult sometimes to show up for live events. If it's a busy time in your life, if you've gone through a life transition, you can't compare. It's like comparing apples to oranges, right? If your life situation has changed and there's some extenuating circumstances, don't expect everything to be exactly the same if you are launching under different life circumstances. So when you are debriefing your launch and you are thinking to yourself, if you set realistic expectations or not, I want you to reflect on what were your expectations for this particular launch and where did they come from? Because remember, when we're looking at maybe perhaps competitors and we're seeing all of these, people joining their pop-up challenge group, you might not know how big their team is. You might not know their ad budget, all sorts of things like that. Did you base your sales goals on actual previous data if you had launched before? Or did you just grab a number out of thin air and hope for a $100,000 launch because that's what everybody states that you should have? What kind of context shaped this launch? How was your energy? Did something change in your life? Did you have the right amount of support? Did you plan ahead enough? And then the final question I want you to kind of think about is, if you knew that your launch results were normal, would you still feel disappointed? Or do you just feel disappointed because you are comparing to other people or comparing to yourself in a previous season of your life without making the appropriate adjustments to things like messaging, energy, changing up your launch strategy, recognizing that you've launched multiple times to the same audience without engaging in any type of launch growth for the appropriate people into your audience. Here's a little reminder of what normal is. So when we're thinking of the live launch conversion rate, we want to think about the number of people who purchased versus the number of people who showed up. So for example, I taught history, so I'm going to use small numbers. If you had 100 people show up live to your event, you can hopefully hope for around 8 people to purchase live. So that means 8 people. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to purchase on the call, but 8 people who came to your webinar, if 100 people showed up live, would purchase. Usually an 8+% conversion rate is great. I have seen and been a part of launch events where the live conversion rate was above 20%, but I will put a big disclaimer on that I have not seen a number above 20% for a couple years. I think that was probably back in 2023. Usually anything above 8% for a live conversion rate is considered good. Another sort of metric that you can look at to check yourself is the number of total buyers divided by the number of people who registered for your event. So to use another number here, let's say you have about 1,000 people. We'll keep it nice and easy. Let's say you have 1,000 people registered for all of your webinars. You're doing 3 webinars and you have 1,000 people registered between the 3. You can hopefully expect about 30 buyers total during your launch. So about a 3% conversion or higher. And then finally, the last sort of metric to take a look at would be your sales page conversion, which we still want to see above that 2%. And again, to kind of get that metric, we want to look at the total sales page views compared with the number of people who bought. And this can be a little bit different because I do usually recommend not only sending your cart open emails, your sales emails. Don't send them only to people who registered for your webinar or your launch event, but also make sure you're sending a couple sales emails to your entire list because you never know who might purchase anyway. Yes, usually the majority of purchases come from those warmer leads who signed up for your launch event and then go on to purchase, but that doesn't mean that a couple purchases don't often come from your regular email list and people who did not end up ultimately signing up for your launch event. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Go ahead and run through those reflection questions. Think about if your expectations from your last launch actually were realistic or if you think you need to do a little bit of a gut check. If you want a pep talk or to bounce some ideas off of me, my DMs are always open over on Instagram at Duxbury Digital. You can message me there. If you are struggling to get the timeline just perfect for your next launch, feel free to download my free resource, the Launch Timeline Toolkit. It is a spreadsheet where you can pop in your ideal cart open date and it will auto-populate the rest of your launch milestones, tell you exactly how long to do which event during your launch, and really help your timeline feel seamless.
Thanks so much for stopping by to hang out with me today. If you want to learn more about how we can work together on a launch strategy or grab a freebie or one of the resources I mentioned, head over to duxburydigital.co/resources. I'll be back here next Tuesday for more practical strategies to take your business from chaos to conversions.